A black teenager collapses, blinded by pepper spray, as a white officer cuffs him, unaware he's arrested the police chief's son. The viral video sparks outrage, tearing a town apart with protests and calls for justice. What happens next will shock even the most seasoned. But let's start at the beginning. Jaden Woods, a determined and optimistic 16-year-old black student, was spending the evening with friends at Millbrook Park. Dressed in his basketball gear, he was unwinding after practice, laughing and sharing stories. The warm atmosphere was filled with music and the hum of nearby conversations, a typical evening in the neighborhood park. Not far away, a group of teenagers became embroiled in a loud argument. While Jaden's group remained uninvolved, the altercation quickly drew attention. Soon, Officer Derek Miller, a patrolman in his late 30s, arrived at the scene, scanning the park for signs of trouble. His eyes stopped on Jaden and his friends. "Step away from the group and put your hands where I can see them," Miller commanded, his voice firm and authoritative. Startled but compliant, Jaden raised his hands. "Officer, I don't understand. I wasn't involved," he began, his voice steady but confused. Miller's response was curt. "Enough talking. Just follow my instructions." Jaden's friends tried to intervene, explaining he hadn't done anything, but the situation escalated quickly. The officer interpreted their actions as defiance and, in an effort to assert control, resorted to dispersing the group with non-lethal means. Amid the chaos, Jaden fell to the ground, overwhelmed and disoriented. The gathering crowd, many of whom began recording the incident on their phones, called for calm. Several onlookers expressed concern, pleading for restraint. Despite this, Jaden was detained and taken into custody. His attempts to explain his innocence went unheard in the confusion. Unbeknownst to Officer Miller, the boy he had detained was Jaden Woods, the son of Charles Woods, the town's police chief. The incident would soon spark a wave of public attention and challenge the assumptions and practices within the department, forcing the community to confront difficult questions about fairness and accountability. News of the incident spreads rapidly, with videos of the confrontation and pepper spraying dominating social media. Within hours, the hashtag #JusticeForJaden is trending across platforms, accompanied by impassioned posts, angry comments, and calls for accountability. National news outlets pick up the story, replaying the footage and questioning the actions of the police. Outrage simmers into protests as people gather outside the Millbrook Police Department, chanting slogans and holding signs that demand justice. Inside the station, Chief Charles Woods, a disciplined and respected leader in his 50s, sits at his desk, watching the viral video. His normally calm demeanor is replaced with a tense, almost unreadable expression, a combination of seething anger and deep personal pain. The sight of his son being treated so brutally by an officer under his command strikes a nerve. He clenches his fists, then rewinds the footage to watch it again, as if trying to process the reality of what he's seeing. "Who authorized this arrest?" Charles demands, his voice cutting through the heavy silence in the precinct's conference room. The officers exchange uneasy glances, but no one speaks until Derek Miller, unaware of the connection between Jaden and the chief, steps forward. "Sir, the kid was resisting and acting suspicious," Miller says, his tone defensive. "I followed protocol." Charles narrows his eyes, his voice cold and sharp. "Protocol? Pepper spraying a child for standing in a park? That's my son you attacked." Miller freezes, the weight of his error crashing down on him. His face turns pale as the room erupts into murmurs. Wasting no time, Charles orders Jaden's immediate release. However, the damage has already been done. Outside the station, the protests grow louder, activists and residents demanding systemic change. At home, Jaden sits in silence, his shoulders slumped and eyes red from crying. When his father tries to console him, the teenager recoils. "How can you defend them after what they did to me?" Jaden asks, his voice trembling with pain. Charles is left speechless, torn between his role as a father and his duty as a leader in a flawed system. For both, the aftermath of the incident becomes a pivotal moment, one that will test their relationship and their resolve to fight for justice. Under mounting pressure from the public, protesters outside the station, and his superiors, Chief Charles Woods initiates an internal investigation into Officer Derek Miller's actions. His decision, though necessary, puts him under intense scrutiny. As the investigation unfolds, media outlets descend upon the Woods family. Amplifying the story, Jaden, who has become the face of the incident, is interviewed on national television. Sitting in front of a camera, his voice steady but filled with emotion, Jaden recounts the fear and humiliation he felt during his arrest. "I kept asking myself, what did I do wrong?" he says, his hands tightly clasped. It wasn't just the pepper spray or the handcuffs. It was feeling like my voice didn't matter. His words strike a chord with viewers across the nation, sparking deeper conversations about racial profiling and systemic inequities. Meanwhile, Miller attempts to defend himself publicly. During an interview, he describes Jaden as a potential threat and uncooperative. Though careful to avoid overtly inflammatory language, his insinuations reinforce harmful stereotypes. Rather than quelling the controversy, Miller's statements ignite even greater backlash. Critics point to his comments as a glaring example of the bias embedded within law enforcement. Inspired by the growing momentum for change, Jaden steps into an unexpected role as an advocate. Guided by local community leaders and fueled by his own resolve, he begins attending protests and speaking at rallies. Standing before diverse crowds, Jaden's voice carries a message of resilience and justice. "This isn't just about me," he tells one gathering. "It's about ensuring no one else has to go through what I did. We deserve to feel safe, not scared." At home, Charles wrestles with his dual responsibilities as a father and a police chief. The growing movement has shifted public opinion sharply, leaving him navigating a fractured community. One evening, he sits with Jaden to address their shared struggle. "I know I've been part of this system for a long time," Charles admits. "But now we have a chance to make things right. We can't change the past, but we can fight to build a better future. For you, for me, for everyone." Their conversation marks a turning point, as both father and son commit to fighting for meaningful reform. Together, they represent both the personal and systemic stakes of the moment. As the investigation concludes, Miller is suspended pending further review. However, public trust in the police department continues to erode. Facing mounting pressure, Charles holds a press conference alongside Jaden. "I have served this community for decades," Charles begins, "but I failed to protect my own son. That failure is a reflection of the systemic issues we must address together." Jaden takes the microphone next, his voice steady but impassioned. "This isn't just about me. It's about every kid who's been judged by their skin color instead of their character. We deserve better." The crowd erupts in applause, and the father-son duo's united front sends ripples through the town. In the aftermath, the police department implements mandatory bias training and establishes a community oversight board to ensure accountability. Miller, unable to reconcile his actions, resigns from the force. His departure is met with mixed reactions, but for Jaden, it feels like a step toward justice. In the final scene, Jaden sits with his father on their porch, looking out at the peaceful street. "Do you think things will really change?" Jaden asks. Charles places a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Change doesn't come easy, son. But with voices like yours, I believe it's possible. The camera pans out as the two share a quiet moment, symbolizing both the struggles they've faced and the hope they've inspired.